Good day to you, everybody. Thank you very much indeed, Mark, for your kind words. And I'm hoping that I can at least live up to your introduction during today's webinar. Um, as Mark introduced it, the journey starts. The business management system part one is about today's webinar. Just a quick few words about me. My name, full name, Richard King Davies. Bit of a mouthful, frequently got wrong, not that I worry too much. I'm a lead auditor for ISO 9001, for TL 9000, and indeed for ESD 2020. That's Electrostatic Discharge Control Standard. As Mark intimated, we have a common bond, our hymn sheet, as it were. More on that later. About the spark that ignites and sustaining continuous improvement on the journey to excellence. It is our raison d'etre, why we get out of bed every morning as an organisation, to help our clients on that journey. I've spent 12 years in the offshore hydrocarbon industry, the oil industry, the nuclear fuel reprocessing industry up at Windscale, as well as electricity generating industries way back when. I've been a lead auditor for 21 years now for management systems. I am fortunate enough to have been audited over in 55 countries around the world. It does not mean I'm an expert. I think that's an impossible thing for anyone to say about ISO 9000, but it does mean that I've seen some stuff, and hopefully I'll be able to bring some of that to bear today. My hobbies, I like throwing myself off mountains, hang gliding, and indeed sailing. And I think forgive the Latin, but risus and butitium is happiness and laughter. And that is something that I believe should permeate everything we do every day. A quick look at the agenda. Well, we've done the melt welcome. You've met me for my sins. And the bulk of today's webinar is about building that management system. And then, as Mark alluded to, we'll have a quick Q&A session and then be signing off. So the journey starts. Let's see about building that business management system. And that's what today's webinar is about. And it builds on the previous webinar that I broadcast back in April, and that talked about the pitfalls that I've seen with organizations as they start the journey towards attaining ISO 9001 certification. You can find that webinar on our on-demand version on the resource center of our website. So the purpose of today's webinar, there's no doubt about it that the journey, looking at before you start the journey towards attaining ISO 9001 and implementing a business management system, it can be daunting. Seems to be a lot of things around. So how do you go about addressing all of those requirements laid out in ISO 9001 2015 that makes sense to the business? How do you address the organization shall do this, that, and the other? And the temptation is always to repeat back in any management system the words of the standard to show how you address it. But that's old school thinking, and indeed we covered that in the last webinar. It's fair to say that the 2015 version of ISO 9001 significantly reduced the gobbledygook that permeated the previous standards. It's a vast improvement, and it's translating the verbiage into useful, cost-effective management systems is still an immense task for any organisation. It's sometimes so daunting you don't quite know where to start. The interpretations of the wording in the standard differ wildly from one organisation to another, but that's actually a wonderful thing. It might not seem like that at the moment when you're looking for help and looking to understand exactly what it is that you can do. But it's actually a truly wonderful thing, and we'll see that hopefully a little bit later on. When preparing for this webinar, it was originally billed as a single webinar, but as I was putting the webinar together, it soon became very apparent that there is an awful lot to do that really it could not be covered in one single webinar. So I've elected to do a part one and part two, and part two will be available in the July timeframe. The exact date I believe is yet to be determined, but watch this space. We will be there. So it's two webinars. Hopefully this and the next one will give you some clues about building the foundations of your management system. First of all, the standard is not changing. And I think this is a very important point to bear in mind. It was recently announced that the ISO 9001-2015 standard will not be subject to the usual cycle of updates and changes and will remain as it is. This is a really good thing, and it should give people a level of confidence that what you're going to be doing today and for the next few months as you assemble your management system, it's going to be valid for more than a few years to come. So it's expected or that massive changes will not be needed to the management system. So you can have faith that what you're doing is not going to have to be rewritten not in the near future. That's certainly not the case. It also means that the standard is being accepted as one that works. It actually is effective in addressing the issues in management system needs. And that's a fantastic thing because, again, it gives that level of confidence that things are not changing. It's working. If it was not as effective as it could be, or if there needed to be tweaks to improve it, certainly they would not have made a decision to leave it as it is. So you've made the decision. Your organization is going to embark on that journey towards attaining certification to ISO 9001-2015. Congratulations. That's a huge decision to make. I think it's also worth pointing out whether you choose to be certified, that's one thing, or choose not to be certified. It really does not make much difference at the end of the day from the perspective of your management system. It's having a management system in place that is key. Clearly, certification gives external validation that your management system is doing what it says it does and meets the standard. As your decision is made, the leadership is fully understanding the role that they must play in the journey, not just to get certification, but ongoing beyond certification. And they are completely and utterly dedicated to the cause. It's part of their DNA. They believe it, they breathe it, they eat it, and they sleep it. That is an important prerequisite, as we covered in the previous webinar. Also, as we covered in the previous webinar, in a perfect world, absolutely ideal world, the motivation for attaining certification is to improve the business. However, as I've seen many, many times, and my colleagues as well, it's seldom that we see this. It's usually driven by customer requirements or contractual requirements. But if there's a recognition within your organization that a certified management system, if it's done properly, it will improve the business. So now what to do? The first thing that I would recommend is learning and education. It's vital. If you haven't already done so, consider enrolling in some kind of a learning course to better understand the ins and outs of the standard, what needs to be done to get a feel for it and start that thought process and that learning process for what needs to be done for the standard. I deliberately use the word learning in this slide here because training is something that is done to you. Learning, you actually have to actively participate in, a significant difference. So I do think that you need to consider enrolling in some kind of learning activity to increase your level of competence and knowledge of the standard. Some people in the organisation should become subject matter experts. I don't believe everybody should. There is no reason why everyone in the organisation should understand and know what the standard is about. It's very simple. The standard requirements will become part of and built into your management system, and that's all they really need to know. But you do need some people who are super users who get what it's all about. I also suggest, as a starting point, you start looking around. There might be other local companies there to you that have been certified, and that would be prepared to share their experience with you and give you some pointers. And generally, my experience is that people are flattered to be asked. Sometimes, even if they're your direct competition, they're still flattered to be asked. Equally, there is a vast swathe of information in the public domain, both on the net and in many publications that are available as sources of information that might help you as you are embarking on your journey. So what to do? Right, something strange coming up straight off the bat. That's typically my way. Think about auditing your certification company. If you are looking to attain certification to ISO 9001 as part of your journey, you might think about interviewing your company, but it sounds a bit counterintuitive really, because you haven't really even started doing anything. But so the certification company should really come in at the end of the beginning, surely, rather than right now. But there is a method in my suggesting that you do this. Interviewing your potential auditors will not only allow you to determine if they're a good fit for the organisation, i.e. can you work with them? Do they have a good bedside manner? Do they understand your system and understand what your wants for it are, even if you haven't started building it yet? Understand if you can get on with them. Sometimes it's just unmissable, as in the two do not mix like oil and water. So understanding and meeting your auditors early is a really good idea. It will also give you an indication of what your auditors are looking for. What are they looking for to help you on the road to certification? The caveat to that is it is not the auditor's management system, it is yours. If the auditor doesn't get your management system, the best place for them is the other side of the entrance door to your building. It will also allow you to select your certification company at your leisure, rather than rushing around at the end of it all to get something in place where, again, you might not get a good fit with the potential auditor. Certification auditors, as I know from huge experience, we are very busy people. Our schedules typically are packed out between 6 and 12 months in advance. So therefore, appointing a certification company early in the journey, it reduces the chance of that disappointment that could push back your big day when the auditor shows up in that first stage 1 audit to help you with your certification. So what to do? Strange as it may seem, and it's a bit novel, I know, but let's start doing some planning. It's difficult at this stage because there are so many variables to consider. But at least getting the concept of what planning needs to be about and what needs to be planned for, at least getting it started is definitely a good thing. The plan is dynamic. It must be dynamic. It needs to be made to be changed as you move along your journey, understanding what needs to be done, changed, or still needs to be tweaked is a very important thing. Plan your management system for the long term. You're not trying to look at, and I've covered this in the previous webinar, you're not looking to, the final goal of your management system should not be certification. It needs to be long beyond that, far beyond that, to help the organisation achieve its business aims. Having a management system strategy is a really key point. What do you want out of your management system in 5, 10, 15, 20 years? And I am talking as long as that. And as Toyota might say, plan long and implement quickly. Take your time planning, understanding exactly what it is that you need to be doing, and get it as close to right as possible as soon as you start rolling out those plans and making it a reality. It's also much harder to revamp a management system than it is to get it right the first time, which might seem obvious. Yes, tweaking, it happens. There will inevitably be tweaking. There will be continual improvement. But the basic structure of your management system, it should be work for you today, tomorrow, and X years down the road. Okay, let's get back to some basics. This is something I frequently use. The ISO organisation is based in Geneva, in Switzerland, and has no connection to your business whatsoever. Wherever you might be, whether you're in the UK, whether you're in France, whether you're in America, Brazil, China, Japan, it makes no difference. ISO is an organisation in Geneva in Switzerland and has absolutely no connection to your business. It cannot know your business. ISO 9001 does not tell you how to run a business. It does not tell you how to run a business, or indeed how to implement a business management system. Yet most of that management system, most of that ISO 9001 is applying to your management system, virtually every aspect of it throughout your organization. The ISO 9001-2015 version is not prescriptive. The versions up to 2000, so the 1994 version, for instance, it did actually say what you had to be doing almost. But that changed 21 years ago in 2000 when the ISO 9001-2000 version was changed. It is not prescriptive. It is purposely generic. It is not telling you how to do anything. It's written around and it should be able to be applied to any organization. Hence, it has to be generic, simple as that. It does tell you what needs to be included in your management system in the form of requirements, shall statements, but it does not tell you how to meet them, hence the non-prescriptive standard. How you do it is up to you, which basically means the playing field is wide open. wide open. And that's one of the joys of my job, is to see how many people interpret the standard differently, the way they implement the requirements. And that is a joy to see, because I'm loving that innovation. I'm loving that difference. It doesn't compromise effective, but how you do it is up to you. So every organisation interprets the standard differently. Again, great thing to do. It's wonderful. I don't need to, as an auditor, I don't need to be spoon fed the standard back to me. I do have some knowledge of it, so the interpretation of it is up to you. There is no single right way to actually implement a management system. Lots of wrong ways to do it, but there's no single right way. The only way that is important is the one that works for you and is effective for you. But you must be able to demonstrate that it actually works for you. That's what an auditor will be looking for. Does your management system work for you? How you document your management system is entirely up to you. You can use videos, photographs, self-documenting processes. Some of the tools out there at the moment are great for that, so you don't have to get stuck into actually capturing every step in the process, because it's all built into the management system. It's all built into the tool that you're using. You can use electronic media. I've seen PowerPoint presentations, HTML slides, all sorts. You can chisel it in stone. You can cast it in bronze. I would suggest that skywriting from aeroplanes is probably not ideal, but it's really up to you how you do it. You can even use paper if you wish, although most of the systems that I'm seeing these days tend not to use paper. They're using electronic management systems. And a quick word of warning about PDFs. PDFs are merely electronic bits of paper, but they're more insidious than paper, because the system, you cannot physically see the system. If you had a paper management system and you put it on one boardroom table or on a desk, you would be able to see the extent of it, physically be able to get your head around the size of it. If it's bits of paper, you can't do that. It's very, very difficult to get around it. So it could be expanding hugely without you realizing it. And the more information and the more documents and the more bits of paper, electronic there are in the system, usually compromises effectiveness. I go back to it. It's your call. It's your management system, and it has to work for you. But you, again, need to be able to demonstrate that it works and it meets the requirements. Right, this is where it gets interesting. You might have already picked up that actually ISO is an organisation in Geneva. So let's forget that ISO thing, shall we? As I said, it's based in Geneva. We don't need to worry about that ISO thing to start with. Let's forget that. There's much more important stuff that you need to be doing, like focusing on your business and how it works. So let's go backwards a little bit and understand the broad aims of a business. And in simple, basic terms, all businesses need to make money, whether they're for profit or not for profit type. But they need to earn money to put food on the table for the employees and the people connected to the business. The business cannot exist ad infinitum unless the books therefore balance. So how do we do this in the most general terms? By consistently satisfying the customers. And I'm now going to talk to what I call the three-legged stool of quality. That is by giving the customers what they want, when they want it, at a price they're prepared to pay. I'm going to repeat that. Giving them what they want, when they want it, at a price they are prepared to pay. They're doing that for your customers. Give that to your customers. They will become repeat because they will be happy. Their level of satisfaction will increase. Now, how do we do this? We have a formula, a demonstrated system with demonstrable effectiveness that is simply repeated over and over, yet improved continuously. Now, people think about a formula and are scratching their heads, well, what is this formula? But let's get too carried away with that, because there are so many examples of what a formula is in this instance around us. One only has to look at reality TV, soap operas, the music industry, same formula repeated over and over again. Result, happy customers, money comes in the door. Just repeating that sausage machine over and over. So, but the formula or system, it must control all of the activities that it's appropriate to control within the organisation. It includes the entire organisation where it's appropriate to do so, and it must be measurable to show its effectiveness. That's not that's vitally part of the standard. Yet actually you need as a business to know that your system is working for you. And by doing that, it's no good working off gut, off intuition. No, we need to be driven by data to show that the management system is effective. But this is really just sound business practice and common sense. And I'm sure most of you will agree with that. It all sounds simple enough. Simple, isn't it? But just think about this for a moment. Every organization, from businesses to a family, is run by executing process. Making tea, after all, is a simple process. It has a purpose, make a cup of tea. It has inputs, hot water, or rather boiling water, if you're pernickety about the subject. It needs tea, milk, sugar if needed, a cup maybe. It has controls, how long you mash the tea, how long you boil, the hot water, the boiling water going into the teacup. And the measure of effectiveness is, does it taste good? So your organization possibly has an informal set of processes. Yes, actually it must do. Otherwise your customers wouldn't get anything. So there is a informal set of processes no matter where you are in the organization, even if they're not captured or documented. People know what they're doing to try to get the goods and services supplied to the customers. Let us for a moment consider what is a process. Now, the strict definition of a process is a set of interrelated or interacting activities which transforms inputs to outputs. Think of the tea again. That's what we're trying to do. We put the tea into the teapot or teacup. If you're a tea bag person, however it works, you put on the boiling water. That is a simple set of interacting activities. And you have those basic raw materials that you then transfer and make into an output, which is the cup of tea. So grandiose a little bit, absolutely, but actually not really. But it's what we do every day that we give the customers what they want, when they want, at a price they're prepared to pay. Now it starts to get interesting. I'm going back to it yet again. To ensure we give the customers what they want, when they want it, at a price they're prepared to pay, we need to make sure that we have control over everything that happens in the executing of giving those customers what they want. We need to control those processes thingies. We need to control how we make the tea. It's very simple as that. And when we consider these process thingies, we need to understand where they should start and where they end. And the bottom line of it is it really must start with the first point of contact with the customer, right the way through the whole of the organization to the delivery of the product or service, and include any after sales service. It also should include invoicing. So we need to take an holistic soup to nuts thought methodology when we're thinking about this. We also need to know empirically, not just think or have faith that everything is under control. Because when we think about these processes, talking about giving the customer what they want, when they want it, at a price they're prepared to pay, the customer is all important, and it must be all important through your organization. So the focus of the organization needs to be on these activities that allows the customer to get what they want when they want. They're the key activities, key processes. In the automotive world, typically they're called customer oriented process, or COPS for short. Right. As these activities are vital to ensure the customer gets what they want when they want it at a price they're prepared to pay, we need to map the journey that the customer's order follows through the organization. Using it as thinking of it as a journey, that order that it comes through from the sales team through the organization, how it's processed, how anything is designed, how anything is bought, how anything is manufactured. It's a journey that order goes through the organization. That's what we need to be focusing on. So whatever tools that you want, doesn't really matter. I've seen blank walls used. Facilities tend to get a bit upset when you write all over their walls, but that's the way it goes. Post-it notes, wallpaper. I've used the management. I mapped a management system once using a roll of blank backing wallpaper that was 30 feet long. But it's all in one place, and that's the point. You map out the activities that happen right the way through, from marketing, receipt of customer order, to delivery and including invoicing. Think of it as one big long journey, one big flow through the organization. Again, going back to that journey flow. I reiterate, it's one long flow from the first point of contact with the customer to the customer receiving the goods or service for which they will pay for, or which they have paid if they're paying in advance. Some simple do's and don'ts. It's important to capture the customer journey as it is, not as you want it to be. You'll probably, when you're doing the mapping, realize that there are some issues going on, that it's actually, we need to change this. It's not very good when you start looking at it in these terms. It's very important to avoid the temptation to do that, because again, there is this thing that you have to sort out, and I'll again talk to improve in the next webinar about continual improvement. You really do need to map it as it is, as I like to say, warts and all. But we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go forward. While you're doing the mapping, try to capture the responsibilities of who is doing what. Is Charlie the one who's pulling it, driving the forklift stuff, unloading the lorry, and is he putting it putting the goods away onto the racks in the warehouse? Things like that. Who's doing it? Who's doing what? Capture that in the process flow. And this is where what we call swim lanes are really useful for this. A swim lane is either a horizontal or vertical channel, if you like, or lane down this flow that you're calling, and it will show where the responsibilities change between the activities within the process, capturing who is doing what. And while we're at it, do not underestimate the use of color. The use of color can add an extra dimension to a management system, which, typically speaking, is in 2 dimensions. Color adds an extra use of it, and an extra dimension to it, and swim lanes really help as well. During the mapping of the flow, understand what other processes could impact that major flow you've had. So for instance, you've got to have competent people. Is your forklift driver competent? So there is, for instance, potentially an interaction with the HR people. There's competence in the maintenance, an interaction potentially with the maintenance of the forklift. There could be software upgrades in a software development organization, a software house. So think a little bit about also where it interacts, but don't get too detailed at this point. Don't start mapping out the process, the activities of those support processes. At the moment, just keep it simple. Just map that there is an interaction from that main flow through the organization to the support processes. I'll talk a little bit more about the support processes in the next webinar. And as we all know, keep it simple. Second S being for me, of course. So keep things as simple as you possibly can, but it's that main flow has to be the focus for now. Some don'ts: don't get too detailed. As I said, keep it simple. The next thing is, don't split things up. Don't be splitting things up. Just capture the flow through the organization. We'll come to splitting things up a little bit more in the future. Don't think in terms of departments. Try to avoid departmental demarcations. And this might make me popular with the accountants out there, but departments really only exist as terms of profit and loss centers, cost centers, rather, within the organization. So try to avoid thinking by department. No organization truly runs by department. Every organization runs by process. And this is a paradigm that you will have to, that will challenge you during this process about mapping your management system. But I'll come back to the flow later. You've got some work to be doing. So I'm going to, if I might, just tack off to think of something else while this mapping process is going on. The mapping is going to take some time, and we must be making sure that other people are kept busy as well. So as I alluded to earlier, leaders are dedicated to the task in hand. You've made that decision. They've hopefully put it in writing that they are absolutely dedicated to you. They've got some stuff they need to be doing as well that's really vital. The first thing that leaders must do is they must identify and determine anyone who's got an interest in the organisation. And I'm using the word parties because that's about the best word I can think of to capture it simply. But let's call those parties and those parties can be impact the organisation. Leaders need to understand who is impacted by, or what the business, or who the business might impact, and who could impact the business, both ways. Those parties are both internal to the organisation as well as outside it. Some parties can have a great impact, others less so. It is understanding who the parties are and the impact they have at this point. Just to give you some clues, parties to most organisations: employees, customers, competitors. On a local stage, they could even be the community that your organisation is operating. It could be the lawyers, it could be the banks, all sorts of things factor into that organisation. And should be considered as part of the journey, as part of this understanding as who those interested parties are. As I said, some of these parties could have a huge impact on the organisation, others significantly less so. But right now, it's understanding who the parties are, understanding and listing who the parties are, that is the point at this stage. Those parties can, through what they do, what they might do, they could have an impact on the organisation. The other thing is to, with respect to these parties, to understand and capture what are the opportunities that these parties present to the organisation. So customers obviously are an opportunity. What's your market space that you're working in? What are your customers moving on to their next project in the next year or so? That all presents an opportunity. Equally, there could be risks. Your competitors could be developing a brand new product or a brand new service. You need to be aware of that so that you can react internally with it as well. And those would be an example of our high impact and a low, both high impact parties on the organisation. All right, got some more to do. That's not all they have to do. We've got to keep the leaders busy after all. Leaders need to understand the business scenario in which they're operating. This can be internal, external, at the local, national or international levels. You need to understand, leaders need to understand what is all this business scenario. Geopolitical things can come into play here, all sorts. And it's a separate thought process from the parties that we were talking about earlier. Understanding that business scenario is very important. You need, as an organisation, to understand where it is at for the journey ahead to get to that destination. If you don't know where you're at right now and you don't understand the situation you're in, you can have the best destination planned in the world, but if you don't realise where you are, the chances of getting to that destination are relatively low. No organisation exists in a bubble, and I thank one of my clients for that statement. They shall remain nameless, but it was a great little subject, a great little word to use in their management system, and I plagiarise it. So thank you, my friends. But those organisations cannot just look inwards; it has to look outwards, and take an outside-in view. And while you're considering this, obviously there is overlap with the parties that I mentioned on the previous slide here. So just to recap what the leaders have to do, they have to understand who can influence the organisation, the organisations that can influence the organisation, and they need to understand the business scenario that could impact the organisation, where the organisation is in. And one of the ways that I've heard about putting it is really quite simple. Think about the known knowns, the known unknowns, and the unknown unknowns. Particularly the last one. There could be all sorts of things that could impact the business that you just don't know about. It's how you actually learn about those unknowns, unknown unknowns rather, that is key here. Leadership must also understand those opportunities and risks that come in from that business scenario. We've seen in recent weeks the issues with respect to shipping internationally, massive increases in shipping costs, sometimes tenfold or even more. Well, that's all about geopolitical geopolitical issues. It's about shortages of recycled cardboard. All sorts of things are coming into play. But it shouldn't be a surprise to any organisation that fully understand the business scenario in which they're in, and also also the parties that impact the business. It should not be a surprise. One should keep a view on those potential risks. Right. Everyone singing from the same hymn sheet is a key thing. Leadership in any organisation should have a strategy, an idea, at the very least, an idea in their mind where they want to go, what they want from the business X years down the road, maybe a vision statement or just even a business plan as to where they want to go. And excuse me for one moment. They also need to understand why the organisation exists. And Mark and myself talked earlier in this, our why as an organisation, about being the spark that ignites and sustains continual improvement. That's our why. So understanding what that why is a really useful purpose to do, although specifically it's not a requirement in ISO 9001. Technical, that's slightly technical touch. It's only a requirement, and the standard only talks about strategy as an input into as part of management review. Leadership must prepare a statement of intent, a rallying call, a charter, if you will, that is understood by everyone in the organisation to provide people with the mindset of how to act each and every day, how to make decisions, what's the way they should be thinking for any aspect and any challenges the business might encounter. And it should also be there to further the aims of the business. That's the way you want people thinking. So this is a very important message that the leaders need to put out to the organisation. But that statement must only be available when it's asked for, but be relevant to the people outside to the company, made available to relevant persons outside the company as well. And that will also tie in to, for instance, interested parties, equally customers. A little bit more on the hymn sheet, if I might. When we're talking about the business scenario, the parties and risk opportunities, they should play a part in formulating this statement. It cannot, that statement of intent, that rallying call, that charter, cannot not exist without a level of understanding about the business scenario and indeed the parties that impact on it. What we're trying to do with that statement of intent is to ensure a constancy of purpose within that organisation so that everyone is singing to the same hymn sheet. Constancy of purpose was something that Dr. Edwards Deming talked about in his 14 Points for Management, which was published around about 1988, so only 30 years old. But it's amazing how many times I see organisations that don't have a constancy of purpose, a reason for existing, that people come to work every day. Once again, keep it short and simple. That target or that statement short and simple. It doesn't want to waffle on for page after page after page. Why? Because everyone in the organisation must understand the statement. Think about the target audience that are going to be reading it, and auditors will ask people about their understanding of that statement. So if it's very, very long and complicated, you're setting yourself up for a potential issue because people need to understand it. So the target statement, the statement is not for auditors, it's not for leadership, it's the employees with the organisation, and it should be pitched at the employees level. There are requirements in ISO 9001 about the content of this statement, and the statement must talk to those requirements as a minimum. But it's much, much better if you can use this the kind of language that is in use with the organisation, because it then becomes much more resonant with employees. If you start just repeating and regurgitating the standards requirements for this message, it's going to get lost on people. A great example I saw addressed continual improvement, and it was just a simple statement that said it's better than it was. Brilliant, absolutely wonderful. The organisation, everyone I spoke to in that organisation were able to speak at length as to what it meant. Yes, does it be measurable? Absolutely, but there is room for a philosophy in there as well. So you should have some philosophy in there, but you need to have and be able to prove that you're making progress towards the aims that you put into that statement. For instance, if the statement says we will be second to none, don't have a problem with that. You just need to know that you are how you're measuring your progress to being second to one. What is the first place look like? How are you measuring it? Some kind of benchmarking activity to show progress towards being second to none. It's not politics. We hold you to truth in this. If you say you're going to do it, let's see that you can demonstrate that you are doing it. But don't shy away from talking to. Oh, hang on. Don't shy away from talking to monetary aims. If a company does not make money and ceases trading, how will the customers be happy? How will the customers be satisfied? talking to a reasonable profit or reasonable covering of expenses, no matter what it might be. Don't shy away. It's not a requirement, but I also think that resonates with the company as well. If this statement is important, which it is, and it is measurable, which it should be, then it also makes sense to have targets put on this, on the measurable portions of the statement. Not every part of it, again, there should be some room for philosophy. Now that the leaders have started going and doing what they've got to do, we can get back to that flow that's been keeping everybody busy. When the mapping process and the mapping task is done, there should be one long department agnostic flow of the activities that represent the journey through the organization. That's what you should have it on the wall, post-it notes, call it what you will. Now we need to start slicing that pizza up into more manageable bite-sized pieces. And the way to do this is to think about measuring. How are you going to measure? Think about the measuring points in that flow. What is measurable? What do you need to know about that flow? Again, department agnostic. You need to make sure that the measuring points are determined by the inputs to and the outputs from each activity. Not everyone, just the key ones. This is really, really difficult, and most organizations really struggle with it. So you probably won't get it right first time, but the clue is to just thinking about having that flow and then breaking it up. Again, not thinking by departments, but by breaking it up by measurement points. But again, when you're considering those measurement points, think about what impacts the customer. Think about what impacts the strategy of the organization. Think about the business scenarios in the parties and the statement. And then the chances are you've just defined the processes of your organization that depict the customer journey, and it's now in manageable chunks. And these processes and the control of them form the bedrock of your business management system. These processes are the formula, when repeated over and over, assure that the customers get what they want when they want it. I want to just put a quick caveat in here. There are many different approaches to mapping processes, and the internet is full of good ideas. A few years back, I actually went on to about 11 or 12 different websites, and the first thing they said to do was to identify your processes. Well, guess what? It's not quite as simple as that, because most people will then think in terms of department. They will not think about the overall process flow. They will not think about measurements. So it might work to just go straight in and identify the processes, but if you try that, it could have some real negative impacts in the future. Then we refine things a little bit. We go back to our purpose statement for a cup of tea. What's the idea of making? Obviously, the purpose is to make a cup of tea. It's the intended result. It is what the process is trying to achieve. This, again, needs to be defined for every process that you have, those key processes, those COPS processes. Then we need to make sure that the process measures or monitoring clearly show that the purpose has been achieved. Again, darn difficult. But again, if you're making a cup of tea, does the tea taste good? Great. We now know that the purpose of the process, making a cup of tea, has been determined as being correct. The processes should bear some alignment to the strategic direction of the company. If you want to head north, guess what? Understanding where you're going east and west can be of some use, but actual fact, what we're really trying to do is head towards north. So alignment to strategic direction of the organization is a good idea. We also need to make sure we've got the inputs to the outputs of the processes captured. Who gives what to whom? I know I said forget the standard earlier, but allow me please to just divert from that for a little bit and refer you to figure 1 in ISO 9001-2015. That figure very clearly shows you what inputs are, what outputs are, controls, and also where you measure a process. You measure a process from the inputs to the outputs. So where are we now? We've identified those parties that could impact the business. We've defined the scenario in which the business operates. We have a statement that is measurable and is a rallying call for everybody. We've defined the processes of the management system. It was hard work, but we've done it. Congratulations. We have the starting points and ending points of those processes. We know the sequencing and interaction of those processes, who gives what to who. We have the inputs and outputs of the processes, and we have measures for the process of the management system that are aligned with the strategy and indeed what we're trying to do. This work will keep you busy for a good long while. There is a lot of information that I've covered today in this webinar. However, I said forget the standard. I said ISO was an organization based in Geneva. I have only strayed in this webinar from the standard on one subject, and that is the strategy. And even then, it is included in the standard. I have not strayed from the subject of ISO 9001 2000. Hopefully, I've left all the technical jargon out. I've tried my very best, failed perhaps with the word parties, but there we are. Hopefully, that has simplified what the standard is trying to do. This is the first part of the building the management system, and I'm going to end at this juncture because there is so much in this webinar, and there is a distinct risk of cerebral overload. There is much to be done. I will be putting together the next seminar, and it will be on the 20th of July. So please register now on our events. I wish you well in your journey to certification. As we talk about anything that we can do to spark and sustain that ignite the journey to excellence is something that we will do. I hope this webinar has helped a little bit on that journey to certification, and I look forward to moving on to the next part of the management system in our next webinar. Please don't hesitate to get in touch with me or myself at TUV's UK's Business Assurance Division. It's what we live for, this stuff. I am a geek. I make no bones about it. I'm a quality geek. I love this stuff. And the spark that sustains, ignites and sustains is what I live for. Thank you very much, everybody. And we'll now move on to questions and answers. So Mark, you are monitoring that. If you could say if there's any questions, please.
Yep, great. Thank you, Richard. Got a couple of questions. The first one is, should we hire a consultant to do all this?
I think you might be muted, Mr. Jenkins. Karma, really? I think you still are.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay.
I can hear you, Mark.
Okay, my computer says I'm unmuted.
Mark, could you start again?
Can you hear me, Richard?
I can indeed, Mark. Sorry, I do apologise. Systems failure here in sunny southeast London.
So we've got 9 minutes left. We've got a couple of questions. The first one was, do we need to hire a consultant to do this for us?
Thank you. So the question was, do we need to hire a consultant? No, you do not need to hire a consultant. It's entirely up to you. It's one of the reasons I suggest getting some education and doing some education and learning. There's nothing wrong with hiring a consultant. However, it is really important that you know the consultant, you get to know the consultant, and you understand and make it really clear to any consultant exactly what it is that you are looking for. You're not looking for that piece of paper. Well, you could be looking for that piece of paper on the wall, but that's a very expensive thing to be doing. A consultant can certainly help, but they don't know your business like you know your business. So just make sure that any brief that you give to your consultant is clearly thought through, and the consultant absolutely understands and keeps you abreast frequently of what it is they're doing to help you get to 9001 certification. If anyone wants more information on that, please don't hesitate to get back, but I hope that's answered the question. Mark, my friend.
Richard. Thanks, Richard. Just one more question, which is quite a deep question. How long does it take?
Yikes. Okay, well, that's a very insightful question. So thank you to whoever asked that question. It depends. There's so many variables that smaller organizations, simple processes, it can be done in a matter of months. A larger organization, particularly if it's international, can take significantly longer. I suppose really the only way to answer that is invariably it will take longer than you think it does. I'm not copping out of answering that question because it is so variable, but I'm all for aggressive timelines, but you need to build flexibility into that because to do it properly will take longer than you probably realize. Despite the best planning that you might have in the world, it could still take longer. Again, I hope that answers the question.
Great, thanks, Richard. So just to wrap up finally then, so I'd just like to thank everybody for joining us this morning. I'm sure you've gained a lot of information from this, but as Richard said, this is part one of two. So there is a second one, which is on the 20th of July, and you can register for that by going to our events page via our website. So as mentioned earlier, we'll be sending you a copy of the presentation and a recording. So you'll be able to get that after the webinar. Please get in touch if you'd like to know anything that we would be able to cover on a webinar. We'd really like to hear what you think. So if there's a particular subject or an area that you're interested in and we don't have a webinar for it already, then please get in touch and we can put something together. If you'd like to get in touch, you can contact us at info@tuvsud.com. The presentation will have on the last page will have Richard's email, the website address and the email address, and also various social media links which you'll be able to follow. So really just to finally wrap up, on the behalf of Richard and myself, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Thank you for your time, and I'd like to wish you an enjoyable rest of your day. Thanks very much. Goodbye.